Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. I am a real-world airline pilot. I currently fly the Boeing 777 in real life. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you a challenging approach in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is the approach into San Diego. We'll be landing on the westerly runway. San Diego in the southwest of the United States in California is an interesting approach. It's quite well known amongst pilots for a few reasons. It has a short runway, it has a steeper approach than normal, and it obviously is in very close proximity to lots of buildings and terrain. So it all adds up to be really quite interesting and one that definitely requires a bit of extra thought. In today's video, I'm going to take you through a full brief of how to fly this approach, some of the trips or trip ups that it can give you, and some of the tricks that you can use to get through it nice and safely. These approach videos I do called challenging approaches because they're not dangerous, they're just challenging. More thought is required to get everything to go as smoothly, efficiently and safely as possible. So that's why we'll take you through those tips today, and you'll see some of the things that real airline pilots will think about when flying their aircraft into airports like San Diego. This is going to be flown using the Boeing 777 aircraft, which I currently fly. This is the 777-200 you see in front of you here, but this will apply, of course, to the 787, the 777, and even the Airbus aircraft that you might choose to fly in here. It's all about energy management and thinking ahead and planning out your approach. So we're going to see all of those things today, as well as, of course, the fun of trying to do a spot landing on a nice short runway. We've only got just over 2,000 meters available to land on today. So San Diego mostly has short haul traffic, but it does also feature long-haul aircraft in real life. So this is something that real pilots will be thinking about probably today. And the day you're watching this video, there'll be some pilots taking large aircraft into San Diego discussing these very same things. Right, let's get started with the video, and let's get briefing. As ever, this video is only for use in home simulation. It's not for any real-world advice, it's just to give you a bit of that extra context. Here we are on the flight deck then, and we are currently in a sort of a late stage of the cruise. But we've done an early descent down and we are just on the arrival. We're about to do a bit of a U-turn here, back towards a bit of a U-turn background facing towards San Diego. I'll show you the charts to show you the setup so you can join me on flying a similar approach. So I've imagined we've done a flight from Seattle down to San Diego, and we are now going to fly the Lucky 1 RNAV arrival. So that is here. Remember, you don't need Jeppesen or Navigraph charts. You can now do this in Microsoft Flight Simulator's Lido charts, but there we go. So we're going to come in on the Lucky 1, which will take you down to this Lucky waypoint, and then that will head you in, and this is San Diego Airport here. So the city is all around it, and if I show you the next chart, you'll see the city is all around it, and there's some high buildings right here, right next to us on final approach. That's what makes it so interesting, combined with a very stepped descent, with then a slightly steeper 3.5 degrees final approach. Now 3.5 isn't a lot, normally 3 degrees is the standard approach path, but it's just enough to make the energy management a little trickier. And it all adds up, especially when you may be flying this approach with a bit of a tailwind, although usually you should have a headwind because of the sea breeze effect. Airfields on the coast, especially the west coast of America like Los Angeles and San Diego, expect to land on westerlies 99% of the time, because in the daylight the sun heats up the ground quicker than it can heat up the water. So the hot air then rises from the land area over here, and as that rises it draws in air off the sea, and you get that sea breeze effect, the wind coming off the sea. So that tends to generate a typical favor for westerly conditions. So that is the plan, and it, like I say, tall buildings, and then if we go to the airfield chart, we'll see the next thing, which is a nice short runway. It's 2,865 meters long piece of tarmac. That's actually not too bad, but here's the problem. The threshold is inset by quite a margin. That's because of the terrain and buildings on final approach. I mean, you can't have the airplanes trying to land at the start of the runway like normal. You have to inset the threshold to keep them a sensible distance away. It's just an unusual picture. It's quite a wide piece of tarmac as well. It's a little bit wider than normal, or for a runway this length, it's quite wide anyway. So there we go, we'll land. Vacating is quite easy though. You head off here and into your terminal to park up. But there is room for congestion errors, and we've seen it before. You might see clips on YouTube of aircraft getting a bit stuck around this area, swapping around different taxiways and so on. But there we go. Not our concern today. We're going to talk about the approach. So we're up here. We're just making a U-turn here, and then we're going to head down from level. To show you the arrival I put in, you can go departure arrival. I've got the RNAV Yankee runway 27, and we've gone by Lucky 1. And then we have the transition of level here, which is, as you can see, we're just making a point through Chad T and then Momar, and then Desert, which is where we're going to be in a bit of a hold while I chat about it. Desert is the en route holding point for out here. Now, American air traffic control will tend to cleave to descend via the arrival, so in that case you would just carry on flying this all the way down following these restrictions that you can see. So at Desert we have to be between flight level 190 and 230, or we're going to be at 220. They can override that, and that's fine as long as it's safe above the terrain. But you'll see these restrictions continue in blue, so at Trixie 12,000 and 14,000 feet we must be between the 2 and 270 knots. And we descend down, and eventually at Lucky, there's a few more restrictions, but at Lucky we need to be at 6,000 feet. Lucky then leads us to Lindy, which is 210 knots above 5,000 feet, and then tells us to expect the RNAV 27 localizer or runway 27 approach. Now, the simplest approach that I would recommend, and the most likely, would be to fly the RNAV approach. Localizer approach is also an option, but we'll talk about the RNAV specifically today. Don't worry about this WAS, this is not a feature that all airlines or all aircraft use, but we're going to fly in, and you can see from Lindy, you then do 240 knots, 4,000 feet to Vidya, and then O'Kane, and then Siji, and then Rebo, and then the runway. And you can see there's more restrictions all the way down here, and these are occasionally difficult to maintain. 4,000 feet at Vidya is fine, except it's at 12.9 nautical miles from touchdown. That means it's essentially on a 3-degree path, so you must immediately start your descent when leaving Vidya to maintain sensible energy management. Also, that means that this entire approach down to Reboot is about 3 degrees descent. So if you haven't slowed down by Vidya, then you're going to really struggle to get the energy out of the airplane. You need to already have the speed back, because like I say, you need to then do a 3-degree descent. You can't level off after that. There's just not the room to do it. You need to keep your descent going. So what we're going to do is talk about how we're going to fly this in the Boeing 777. How do we get this as a sensible sort of thing to do? So let's just hide that so we can have the full charts. So first of all, the star. Well, the star is actually, and this is one of the reasons I want to talk about this. It's quite straightforward. Let me just make it a bit bigger for you there. It's quite straightforward. In the Boeing aircraft, there's a really nice way to fly it. If I press data on here, you'll actually see all the information come up on the screen, and we'll just zoom in. And what I can do is I can go through, go to legs. We can actually, and then I'll go to plan, and we can select through each waypoint and check that it is loaded correctly into the FMC. And you can also see it written down here. So let's pick Desert 230 and 190. So there's Desert 230B, which means 230 below, 190 or above. And then and that's the hold. I've got a hold in there at the moment. And then Trixie 270, 14,000 feet or below, 12,000 feet or above, 14,000 feet below, 12,000 or above. And on it goes, and as we step through, you'll see that written next to each of these waypoints throughout. So that takes all the way down, all looking good, Lindy, and then there's Vidya, as we just discussed, 4,000 feet. So that's all great. Something that is a bit of a shame in the 777 is that we don't get any vertical situation display. It won't tell us if it can't make the restriction, whereas the 787 would show us on the vertical display, and the Airbus would actually tell us in the FMS. It would say unable next constraint, but there we go. So, or too steep path. So that brings us round. So what we can do is, as these restrictions are in, the best way to fly this descent is to just engage LNAV and VNAV. Because it sounds quite difficult, right? You've got all these different restrictions and speeds you need to make, but we've just checked and the airplane knows these restrictions. It's got even the speeds in. Look, 270 knots at Trixie at 270 knots. And this is correct. You would check this in real life, but this is what you would expect. So air traffic control expects us to fly it like that, and you can see the terrain also requires us to fly it like that. That's part of the reason we can't just descend down here. There's some big mountains here. The MSAs, look at that, 11,000 feet, and this terrain here looks like it could be getting close to 12,000. So we need to fly this arrival as it is and not get too distracted, or certainly don't want to get lower than these altitudes. There's actual minimum safe altitude is shown here. 87 is the lowest altitude we can fly on this leg, which ties in with the Husker 87 point. Good. So I'm going to leave the airplane at LNAV and VNAV. All we need to do is lower the altitude window to allow the aircraft to begin its descent. So when we're cleared for this arrival, not the approach, just the arrival, I'm going to put in the last constraint, which is actually Lindy at 5,000 feet. So if they clear us to descend via the Lucky one, then I'd put in 6,000 feet. If they clear us to descend via Lucky with the Lindy transition, then I'd put in 5,000 feet. So there we go. It's worth checking with air traffic control if you're not sure. If you're flying this on VATSIM and you're a European pilot, this will be quite different. So it's worth checking these things. But there we go. This is the first stage of the difficult part of this approach. Is this highly involved arrival with lots of restrictions and speeds coming down over the terrain. Great. So we have a plan. Then in LNAV VNAV, we'll get down to Lindy at 5,000, and then hopefully we'll be cleared for the approach. So once we are cleared for the actual approach, I will put in, would have hopefully descended to 4,000 feet if we were cleared down, and then we'll maybe earlier than this, we might have been cleared for the full approach. So whenever they clear us for the RNAV Yankee on runway 27, I'm going to wind the altitude window all the way down to the MDA, which today 760. So I'll put that into the window. And that will be absolutely fine, and the airplane can then begin its descent again, remaining in LNAV and VNAV. That's what we want. We want to make sure we're in VNAV path, not VNAV speeds. So we'll talk about that later as to how that could catch you out. But VNAV path, getting the flaps out will help because that will force us to. As I said, at video we need to have slowed down. So I want to be I'm potentially even flaps 15 here. I want some drag flap out, and I want the airplane ready to drop the gear if I need it to keep the energy under control. So probably flaps 15, maybe flaps 5 if it's all looking pretty good. And we have a strong headwind, and down we go. Once we are below the missed approach altitude by 300 feet, so once we are below this altitude by 300 feet, then we can set that altitude in the window. So it says climb to 2,500 feet. So once we're below 2,200 feet, then I can wind this altitude window back up to 2,500, i.e. putting it above us so that it's out of the way. And that's totally fine. Don't worry too much about that. We'll talk about that later. That's a bit of a weird Boeing thing. I don't particularly like it, but it's just how they want it done. Right, and then we'll fly down this approach. As I said, 3.5 degrees. So at reboot, which is 5.2 nautical miles from touchdown, I want to be fully configured. I need the gear down and all the flaps out. So again, before we've even begun that final descent, we need to put everything out. The other thing I need to do is put in some sort of speed control. So I will want to come back to my approach speed. Air traffic control might try and keep you as fast as 180 knots here. Now that's possible depending on your SOPs as to when your aircraft needs to be stable. A lot of airlines need their aircraft to be stable 1,000 feet above the runway. And stable means at the right speed with the right configuration, so gear and flaps out. And on the profile, so on the lateral profile, so in line with the runway, or certainly following the lateral profile that might not be in line with the runway, but today it is. And the vertical profile, so on this slope. Now, it's not actually possible, realistically, to do 180 knots to reboot that easily. If you have a 500 feet stable criteria in visual conditions, some airlines do, then that could be fine. Or if you're allowed to exceed the criteria, if it's for an air traffic control speed restriction, also could be fine. But 180 knots is a little unrealistic. I'm going to negotiate with air traffic control to try and get the speed back a little bit. We can certainly do 160 or maybe even 170 knots to 5 miles. 170 would be absolutely fine, but 180 would be a little bit pushing it. So that's the other thing that happens on this approach. The speed control can be very fast. And then we're going to have beautiful views of the city. We're going to fly past these buildings, which will be absolutely fine. And then we'll be straight in onto landing runway 27. So excellent. So let's get this set up. We need to put the 760 minimums in, and we need to put in the QNH. So I'm going to back set the QNH. I'm just going to put it into the bottle. So 29902 is in there. And we said minimum 760, so I'll have the usual joy of this little dial, which I cannot stand. It's pretty bad in real life, although I have to say the 777 one is better than the 781. Explain that one to me, I don't know. Look at that, it's just constant, always going to be wrong. 760 is what we need. I can't believe I have to edit my videos to take out this section, but often I do. 760. 29902. Also landing performance, short runway. That's the next step. How do we mitigate or deal with the problem that we have a short runway here? 2,800 meters, but if we look at the actual landing distance available to us today, it's only 2,300 meters. Well, you can see here I've gone for all reverse and flap 30. Flap 30 just brings the speed back a little bit. It also means that there's less energy in the brakes because we're going to have to do some good braking here. So it's all worth it. So we'll do a flap 30 landing today. So I'll take flap 30, put it in there, which reduces the approach speed, look at that, by 7 knots, pretty good. And we're going to go auto brakes 3 and max reverse. So I've got auto brakes at 3, max reverse, which gives us a nice, comfortable stop margin. Landing distance is only 1,700 meters required. Obviously, you'd have a safety factor on top of that, 15%, and that still keeps us below 2,300 and should give us vacating somewhere sensible without cooking the brakes. No brake fans on a long-haul aircraft. They're too heavy to fly around the world. You don't want to carry brake fans for 12 hours just in case you need them once a year. So yeah, we don't have those. So it is something you would think about on a short runway like this on the 777. Is how do you keep those brakes a sensible temperature? So maximum reverse will take some of the heat out. Flap 30 will help as well. And then also not going for the maximum brake setting, just going for a sensible compromise between distance and stop margin. Now, there we go. That is pretty much us set up. So let's run our descent checklist. So we have, it's because of the way I've been doing the video. Let's do the descent checklist. Recall. Nothing wrong with the airplane, so that's a good thing. You wouldn't want to land in San Diego with things like brake, hydraulic failures, things like that. Notes, we have no notes on the checklist. Auto brake 3. Landing data, we've gone for VREF 30 at 133. Minimums 760. And approach briefing completed. Descent checklist complete. So now we'll leave the hold and we'll demonstrate that we can actually just fly this using LNAV VNAV. So exit hold, execute. And hopefully now the airplane will continue on. So let's imagine we've been cleared to descend via this arrival. So what altitude will we put in? Well, they might say descend via but stop at a certain altitude or something like that. But it's very common in America just to say descend via the lucky one. So like I say, if they cleared us all the way to Lindy, then I'm going to put 5,000 feet in, as that's the restriction there. So I can put 5,000 feet into this window now. 5,000 feet. And the airplane actually thinks we're a bit high. It wants to be a bit lower. It wanted to be closer to 19,000 feet, it looks like, at this at desert. And here's another thing with the Boeing. It doesn't tell you in the FMS. The Airbus would show you what altitude it's actually going to be, and then you could interrogate the FMS to see the restriction. All the Boeing tells you is the magenta is showing us what restrictions it's obeying, but it won't tell us what it actually thinks it's going to be, which is a bit of a shame. The 787 would, because we'd have the vertical situation display on the bottom of the navigation display, but there we go. Anyway, hold LNAV VNAV speed. We're not unreasonably high, 2,000 feet, and we're rapidly gaining on it. So that's looking pretty good. Great. I'm also going to put the terrain on because the weather looks lovely out there. So let's have the terrain display showing. And we should also have traffic showing. Yeah, there we go. And as you can see, high terrain, 10,700 feet or 10,600 feet is going to be shown. Let's brighten up that terrain as well. Good. So it's also going to accelerate once we get out of the hold. It will go back to 270 knots. And you see it will do a bit of a nosedive to do that because it's in VNAV speed. It's not on the path. The path is beneath us. We need this in VNAV path. VNAV speed means it's not obeying anything. It's actually just going to fly the speed selected in the window. But we need it to obey the actual path itself. We update the heading bug. So to do that, you need to work out whether you're high or low, and then allow the aircraft to intercept the profile. We're obviously high. The profile is 700 feet beneath us. So in a moment, it should, where we have VNAV pressed, it should capture that path. And we'll see that in just a moment, I hope. Because it's lowering the nose to accelerate to the next speed restriction, 270. Actually, it's only going to go to 250 for some reason today. And if you need to help it, which we might do today, look at that. It's sort of settling. It's not going to make it. It's not gone onto VNAV path. I'm not on the profile fully. So the risk here is, if it stays in VNAV speed, it could just wander high. It could miss the next restriction because it could stay too high. It needs to be in path. So I'm going to use a little bit of speed brake. And that's a very common thing to do on the long haul Boeings. In the Airbus, you might start manipulating the speed a bit more and so on. The speed brakes are very effective on the 777. They are really quite excellent. Same on the 787. And now, speed brake's out. It's pushed us down just enough. And we're going to hold VNAV path. So speed brakes can go away. And now the airplane is on the profile. Now we've gone below the transition altitude, and our next constraint, they are altitudes, not flight levels. Notice that we were on flight level restrictions above flight level 190. Now it's an altitude restriction. It's in thousands of feet, so we need to be on the QNH for this one. And that's something you would brief. So we'll just set the QNH there on both sides. You would brief, when are we going to swap over from standard to QNH? And that will be when your last restriction based on a flight level is gone. And now we can run the approach checklists. Altimeters are on 29902. That's the approach checklist complete. We've got lots of fuel, by the way, 19 tons. That's an excessive amount of fuel, really. Your alternate would probably be Los Angeles, which is just up the road. Although that would be a busy place to arrive. You wouldn't want to arrive on minimum fuel into LA, personally, but there we go. And now it's going to obey the restrictions, obey the speeds, and in fact, the great thing about this is we're going to fly this in LNAV VNAV all the way down to the final approach. So I'll see you down there. So you can see here the aeroplane now at this next restriction has had to shallow out. To reach Husker at 8,700 or above, it's raised the nose, it's gone into speed mode, and that's back to idle because it's meet the restriction, but yeah, it added a bit of thrust to level out and fly this part of the arrival, and then it will regain and continue on down. So it's all calculated for us. Very nice indeed. The city is over here once we get past these mountains. You can see how fast this is looking actually. We're only doing 250 knots, but we're whizzing along over the ground out there, and this is how these arrivals can sort of unravel on you. You could imagine in real life you'd be now here. Obviously, if you've flown in a long-haul aeroplane, you might have been flying for a long time, or it could be a very funny time on your body clock. If you've come from the UK, this could be midnight, 1 a.m. for you. And you're now going to have an awful lot of aircraft talking around you. This is a very, very busy piece of airspace, Southern California. You've then got an arrival that's full of restrictions to make and speed controls to make, and you're coming up on the main part of the flight, which is you've got to safely land the airplane in the airfield you're aiming at on this short runway with the terrain around. So it all adds up into quite something. And like I say, it's easy for me to sit here and talk to you, but there's actually a lot going on. You'd be doing your obviously communicating with the cabin crew, you'll be communicating with each other and their traffic control a lot. Those things go on. One nice thing though is that having these arrivals set up like this in America, where they have all the constraints very clearly marked and they just say, yeah, descend via that arrival, they just expect you to do it, and they do actually it does tend to cut down on the amount of communicating you need to do with air traffic control. Whereas in a lot of Europe at this sort of phase in the flight, you would get constant clearances from air traffic control. You'll get new descent clearances, new headings, things like that. But it's just different ways of managing it. It also depends on how predictable arrivals are. You know, there's only the only aircraft here is going into San Diego. All the other air traffic will probably be doing sort of shorter, smaller routes around. Anyway, through 10,000 feet, we'll get all the landing lights on because of all those aeroplanes we've just discussed, and we'll get all the passengers sat down, of course. So there's the cabin ready. That's good news. We're also flying an RNAV approach, so it does rely on our aircraft being able to navigate correctly on its own. You'll see I have a VOR tuned here, but it's not any use to us. It's not on the airfield. I'm not actually sure where that VOR is. But yeah, it's back over our shoulder. So what I'm going to do is I need to check that the aircraft's navigation performance is acceptable. So the required navigation performance at the moment is 1 nautical mile. So the aircraft needs to know where it is within 1 nautical mile. And our actual navigation performance, the ANP, is 0.06. That means the airplane knows very precisely where it is. It knows where it is to within 0.06 nautical miles. So way higher than it needs to be. That's because we're using GPS. So if we go to the position page, we can see the FMS position is based on the GPS. So that's great news. You know, that's what we would want to make sure we have enabled before we fly an RNAV approach. We need that to be turned on. You would only turn that off if you were having GPS interference, which is a whole other topic, which is something that does go on in the world. But yeah, at the moment we have that turned on. If we couldn't use the GPS, it doesn't matter. We would fly that localizer approach I talked about earlier, which would be using an ILS localizer, and then we would plan our vertical profile accordingly. And it would actually be a very similar way to fly in the 777, but there we go. So aircraft's in good shape. We have what's called the navigation performance scales on. So these show us how far off we are off the planned routing. So we're just ever so slightly off on the centre line, but it's by a tiny, tiny margin. So that helps us monitor this. If you didn't have that, some older 777s won't, or they weren't all fitted like that, you would zoom in to 10 nautical miles so you can see your distance off the centre line. But there we go. So you see we're already here. It's not taking long at all. We're coming through 6,000 feet over the terrain beneath us, and we're still doing 240 knots, coming up at Lucky at 6,000. Now, as I said, we actually need to get the energy under control. We can't just rock up and fly this arrival without getting the speed back, really. We're already down at 6,000. I wanted to be under control by VIDA, and as you can see, that's not even 10 nautical miles away, and I wanted to have flap out there. So the airplane now is finally slowing down, but I'm going to need to help it out. To do that, what we're going to do, and here's the FMC message saying, probably going to tell us that it's unable to do that. I'm going to open the speed window now, select the up speed, I'm going to put out some speed brake, and we'll go to flap 1. Flaps 1, and then we'll now travel out on the leading edge, and you can see speed brakes, a bit of slats. Just going to squeeze the energy out of this airplane now. So let's go flap 5, speed scoop, flaps 5, and I'm going to wind the speed back to the flap 5 speed. We're still in VNAV path, and this is crucial. Remember, we must be in VNAV path. I'm going to imagine now air traffic control has cleared us for the approach. So I put in 4,000 feet. But remember what I said? Actually, we're going to put in the MDA. So to do that, we must select auto on this little dial. And now it goes in hundreds of feet. But crucially, it allows me to select 760. There it is, because it will see the MDA here and select that. And look how the nose is dropping as it's trying to get to Vidya. So yeah, speed brake, flap 5 out. This is all required now to make this approach work. And there's the city. How cool is this? It's a really cool place to fly into here. And obviously you have big Air Force bases and fighter jets around as well. Okay, there's flap 5 speed, so speed brakes away. Energy's under control. We've got no headwind today. It's quite calm, benign conditions. Airplane's going to turn right. 4,000 feet or above at Vidya. And then we're going to just check these altitudes as we descend down. So let's go to our approach charts. Oh, there we go. Next one, Arcane 3,600, which it's in, and we are currently above. Excellent. Now, it's starting to spool up a bit to shadow out for these parts, so I need to be careful here. Do I actually want it to do that, or should we start slowing down a bit more? Well, the reality is, in San Diego, I can tell you it's unlikely air traffic control would let us slow down any more than this. They'd quite likely, actually, have us at 180 knots. So the trick to this is just going to have the energy under control as much as you can, and if you cannot do it, you need to speak to air traffic control. Let's put the final approach course in there.
2,500.
There's a radio altimeter. It's come alive quite early on the approach. We're landing at sea level, so it's 1,200 feet early, but that's because we've got all this terrain beneath us, these ridges and mountains. So we're expecting it to drop away again. That one just set us off there. And it has. Look at that, it's gone completely. Now, flat 15 speed is actually 215 knots, so we can go to flat 15, give ourselves a bit more drag. So I'll do that. And like I say, I'd probably negotiate with air traffic. I'd say 170 to Rebo, and hopefully they would say, yeah, that's okay, that's close enough for what we want. So let's go to 170. We've got flat 15 out. And here's the town. It's such a cool approach, this. You've got all these big skyscrapers, and there's a famous car park in San Diego where people can sort of plane spot from. And you can see the runway's got a lot of tarmac around it. You can already start to see that, which gives it a weird illusion. Right. Here we go. So there's no point configuring, don't need to configure the gear too early. I'm going to do it at about 6 miles. You can actually see the distance to go. If I go progress page, it's to end of descent. Now this is because the runway is in the box. It actually is listed all the way to the runway 27. That works. So end of descent is at runway 27. It's in 8 nautical miles, or now 7 nautical miles. So it's 7 miles from touchdown. As a result of that, as a result of having runway 27 coded in all the way to the threshold, I can actually leave all the flight directors on. I just disconnect the autopilot and land, a bit like an ILS. So let's configure now, gear down. The flat 20 limit speed is actually 195, so I can even go to flat 20. And we can arm those speed brakes now, but we might need to use them again in just a moment to slow down from Rebo from 170. We're also going to flap 30. Now it's a slightly steeper final approach, and flap 30 takes longer to travel, so it's worth getting that travelling as soon as we can. So I'm going to say that's close enough. So let's go 20. Let's go for flaps. Let's get the speed brakes out now, because we're going to need this. Then let's go flaps 25 for below limit speed. 25. Let's wind the speed back to that. And it's unbelievable how long it takes to go from 20 to 30 on the 777. So look at this. We've got gear, flaps, and speed brakes trying to get this airplane to slow down here, because it's just that bit steeper. Flap 30. We're going to set 138, and we're going to arm those speed brakes. That's worked nicely. It slowed down a bit quicker than expected there. But look, 30 has travelled now. Landing, checklist is complete. Now, what happens is, from 20 to 30 is very slow. So if you get to flap 25, that gives you a bit of a better option, because then you've got half the flap travel run. But it's surprising, and it's easy to then not have the full flap out in time. Remember, we're landing with maximum reverse. And here's this great view. So you've got this ridge line here, you've got all the buildings on your left. It's quite crazy. Absolutely love it. So landing checklist was complete. Oh, and what we haven't done, we needed to set, and we must do it now, otherwise it won't work, the gear and altitude and all that. So you can see there's always something you can forget, 2,500. Otherwise the airplane would level off at MDA, which would not be very convenient. And here we go. So let's take out the autopilot. and not much to do. The airplane was doing a good job. I'm not sure why flight simulators Pappies have gone 4 whites. We're just going to keep flying our descent profile on there. That's the flight simulator bug, I think. They might not be tuned to 3.5 degrees. I suspect that's the problem here. Because look, you cannot be any lower than this. We are right over these buildings. It's a really remarkable one. And remember, the auto throttle will go to idle on touchdown, but we have to select reverse. So just keep it coming down now. Don't want to drift too high. I'm not sure where the flight director's going. There we go. Keeping it sensible. Nice and gentle. See, we're needing something close to 800 feet per minute.
100.
Keep coming down.
50. 30.
There.
20. 10.
And get it down, please. There's touchdown, idle, max reverse. And we'll let the auto brake take the strain. Max reverse is just getting the energy out of those brakes. And we'll do max reverse down to 60. And this is quite a typical exit. The next one coming up here. So coming back to idle reverse. Taking over on the auto brakes. And we'll come off with this exit here. And there we go. You can see how it all adds up at the end there. It's just the energy management and the speed and the steepness and the short runway. It all comes together at once, and you just cannot get distracted. You've got to keep the focus there. The whole crew needs to be focused in on everything. Did we have the missed approach altitude set? Is the speed under control? Are we going to get the flaps all the way out in time? So let's clear the runway, which they would want you to do in San Diego. It's a very busy place. And bring to a stop here. Set the parking brake. Welcome to San Diego. So that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been interesting for you. I do like these challenging approach videos. It's good fun to show you some of these things that we deal with, and I think it's quite a neat way of summing up what the modern job of an airline pilot is. It's this management of so many things going on that you need to bring it all together. Yes, the autopilot's there, but it can't account for a lot of the things we've done, as we saw, even with the fact that the coding was all in there. The pilots are responsible for getting all the energy, getting the airplane in the right place, and it's it still takes a lot of work, a lot of coordination to do that, even in a modern jetliner like the 777. So here we go. I recommend you give this approach a try. It's the, as we said, the RNAV Yankee into San Diego onto runway 27. It's a good bit of fun, spectacular final approach, and it looks great in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This was filmed in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. That's all for today's video. There'll be lots more videos to come. We've got more guides, live streams to come, and the channel has also recently passed 100,000 subscribers, which I cannot believe. I'm going to make a separate video to talk about that, and of course we'll do a celebratory live stream when we can. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing and being a part of the channel. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I really didn't think the channel would ever be at this point, so it really something. So thank you so much for watching. I really do mean that. We'll see you again in another video or live stream soon. Bye bye.